And Dave, I'll pass it to you for the welcome.
Okay, well, welcome everyone to another Starting Strong. This one's tonight about understanding County Office of Education's budgets. We've got great presenters today, and I'm looking forward. I hope this isn't getting in the way of your Cinco de Mayo celebrations, but we'll be done, and then you'll still have time to enjoy the rest of the evening. And with that, I'll pass it back to Christopher.
Thanks, Dave. You got one more.
Ah, Okay, let me start by doing a quick review of the key goals that the Association for California County Boards of Education has, because this is the only organization totally devoted to the unique interest of county boards and our voices. So our first point is our job is to advocate and amplify the issues that affect our boards and the students and families we serve. It's also about a partnership for success, strong partnerships with our partner, the county superintendents and the County Superintendents Association. And then the issue is about elevating and engaging and empowering our leadership within county boards, fostering collaboration, fostering strong support for each other. One of the reasons why we're running the webinar tonight. And then finally, ACCB is forward looking. It's about making sure that things actually happen. It's about innovation. It's not about status quo. And with that, I'll pass it back to Christopher. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave, our wonderful Vice President and Secretary. Passing it over to Bev for our quick icebreaker.
Okay. Well, we thought it might be fun to start the evening out with three true or false questions. So the following statements will be either true or false, and you can either raise your hand or you can put your response in chat. So, question number one. County board trustees may make line item adjustments to COE budgets. True or false? Chris, can you see what we have? I can't. You're on mute, Christopher.
Sorry about that. So far, not much activity in the chat. However, I do see we have Michael and Michelle here. And so if either of them would like to join us off mute to respond to that first question, County Board Trustees making a line item adjustment, is that true or false?
Well, I'll answer. The answer to that is false. We are not allowed to make line item adjustments to the county office budgets. And this is sometimes a contentious subject at budget meetings in counties, but according to law, we are not allowed to make line item adjustments. Number two, does LCFF stand for Local Capacity Funding Formula? True or false? Well, the answer is false. And can somebody tell me why? It's capacity. That is not the right word. Can somebody give me the right word for local blank funding formula?
Control.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad I finally got some response there. Yes, it's local control funding formula. And last but not least, local education agencies are required to report financial data in the SACS format at least 4 times a year. True or false? This one is true. We are required to report 4 times a year. So, with that, Chris, I'm going to hand it back to you or over to Juliana.
Okay, thank you, Beverly. So it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight's presenter, Elizabeth Lisa Rico. She is the Deputy Superintendent for the Tuolumne County Superintendent of Schools. She has over 15 years of managerial experience in school finance. She is a certified chief business official, California Notary Public, and holds an active contractor's license to the California State License Board, which I never knew. Oh, Lisa, I would have been calling you all the time. And she also has a bachelor's degree in business administration and is currently pursuing a master's degree in organizational leadership. One of her board members, I reached out to the board, and one of her board members told me this: working with Lisa Rico, knowing her depth and breadth of knowledge, gives me the confidence to make important decisions about our county budget and our county programs. Lisa, this is from me. Lisa is professional, she is knowledgeable, and she is just awesome. All right, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's a true pleasure and honor to be here with you, to be able to share some important items with you. I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see. Oops. Bear with me 1 second. Sorry. My technical difficulties.
This is Yvonne Chen. While Lisa's doing that, I love to introduce my good friend, brand new to the Los Angeles County Board. That's Michelle. Michelle is right here with us. It's her first month, second month.
Hello, Michelle.
Welcome, Michelle. Congratulations.
And I have one of my new board members here this evening as well, Mike O'Neill.
That's
So,
right. We have Leiko
welcome,
and
Mike.
Mateo. My goodness.
Oops. Okay, here we go.
Ooh,
I apologize for that. I should be an expert in Zoom, but I'm not. I love presenting in person, so I hope someday we will have that opportunity in the future. But again, my name is Lisa Rico. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for Business Services at Tuolumne County Superintendent of Schools. And after this presentation, it is my hope that the slide deck will be shared with everyone. My contact information will be on that cover sheet. So basically, here's a rough overview of the agenda. We're going to discuss why the budget matters, the role of the Board of Education, the budget process. Then we'll dive into the review of revenue sources. We'll review expenditures, and then we'll go into the summary of expenditures and budget considerations for COEs. Then we'll dive into the ending fund balance versus cash, state required minimum reserves for economic uncertainty, and then a broad overview of Form 1. It's the general fund activity. And then I'd like to just give you a couple of tips to look forward to, looking ahead in the future as you begin developing and listening to your county office staff talk about budget development for the 25-26 fiscal year. If at any time throughout this presentation you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. I will check in periodically as well. And then at the end, we will allow for Q&A as well. So let's dive right in. What is the purpose of the county office of the budget, right? Many wonder what the purpose of the budget is. The budget is a financial blueprint of the organization. It aligns resources with goals and priorities to serve students based on the local control accountability plan. And I love that we touched on that during the icebreaker. Beyond compliance, it's a tool for strategic planning and stewardship, right? For county offices, it ensures that we're meeting mandates in areas like alternative education and special education. Accountability is so important. That is my next one here, sorry. I think there's a delay. I'm progressing my slide. Okay, Sorry about that. Why is accountability important? It's important because we're trusted stewards of public funds. Transparency is essential, right? Accountability builds credibility and capacity with our school districts, our staff, and our community. Financial reporting, interim reports, and audits, it helps us catch any issues early, and then it ensures that decisions are being made in the best interest of students and long-term sustainability. And what are the key components of a budget? So a budget includes our revenues, our LCFF, property taxes, federal, state grants, state, local resources. Our expenditures include everything from salaries to benefits and services, supplies, capital outlay. And then the most important piece, in my opinion, not the most, but one of the most important pieces, the reserves, the fund balance. Funds that are set aside for emergency or planned uses are so important. Then we have our multi-year projections also. It's a tool to assess the fiscal health over time. We also have budget timelines. The budget timelines stipulated in statute, they require local education agencies to report financial data in the standardized account code structure. Again, another question that we had earlier. The standardized account code structure format at a minimum of 4 times per year. So the adopted budget, we report prior to July 1 and subsequent to the LCAP. The proper hearings must take place prior to the LCAP and then budget adoption. The first interim report, as you all know or may know, are transactions through October 31st. And that is due to the County Office Board of Education honored before December 15th. Then we have our second interim report for transactions through January 31st, and that is due to the state by March 15th. And then lastly, we have unaudited actuals for final transactions that are due to the state for school districts on September 15th and for county offices of education by October 15th. You'll notice that I also included the third interim report here in our timeline. While third interims are uncommon, they do exist per statute. A third interim typically signifies fiscal distress or concerns requiring closer monitoring. If a school district or a county office has received a qualified or a negative certification, which we will discuss shortly, on its second interim report, this additional reporting would be required. So we want to avoid third interims if at all possible. Do we have any questions before I move on? Or if I'm speaking too quickly, please let me know and I can adjust my tone as well.
Can you just tell me what the acronym LCAP
capture? The LCAP, oh, I'm sorry, yes, the Local Control Accountability Plan. So the Local Control Accountability Plan is basically your blueprint for your budget. So it should drive, that plan should drive the budget process and the budget development to ensure that the budget aligns with the goals and mission and vision of the county office and or school district, so. Next, we have our interim certification for education code 42131, the district or county office. So the positive certification shall be assigned to any school district that, based upon current projections, will meet its financial obligations for the current fiscal year and 2 subsequent years. We love positive certifications, right? A qualified certification is assigned to a school district or county office based upon current projections that they may not meet its financial obligations for the current fiscal year or 2 subsequent years. That's a red flag. We need to start really looking at that and ensuring that we're able to meet our financial obligations in the future. And then a negative certification. We never want to be in this situation. We never want to have our districts in this situation. And as a county office and the compliance component under AB 1200, we should be well informed before a district is headed down this path. There should have been intervention and assistance from the county office. Sometimes districts don't always want our guidance and assistance, but we always do our due diligence to try to ensure and navigate strategies with our districts to help them ensure fiscal stability. So negative certification is assigned to any school district or county office that they will be unable to meet their financial obligations for the remainder of the fiscal year or subsequent fiscal year. Essentially, at this point, they're unable to make payroll in that given year. That is very critical and important that we avoid this at all costs. Our good friends over at FICMAT would have to get involved, and we don't like visits from them when we're in these types of situations, right? We want to avoid that. Now we're going to walk through the budget development cycle. Boards are responsible for approving and revising district budgets at least 3 times per year. At initial budget development, it begins early, and then consecutively while we're developing the next year's budgets, the current year budget is also revised. So the California School District and County Office budget cycle, as shown here in the circular graph, really helps us visualize that budgets work is always ongoing. It's not seasonal, it's circular. June, we're looking at the local control accountability plan and adopting the budget. So the process starts in June with the adoption of both the local control accountability plan and the district's annual budget, but that work started months prior, right? This budget sets the roadmap for the upcoming school year and must align with the local control accountability goals. Even though it's the end of the school year, the beginning of the fiscal year, trustees must approve overworking budget. These are our goal. Audited actuals period, which is also it can be referred to as year end of the prior year. So by September for school districts or October for county offices, the books close for the previous fiscal year. The unaudited actuals show what was actually spent and received compared to what was budgeted. This really helps you evaluate whether their district stayed on track or over or underspent. Then we slide into December. It's our first interim period. The first interim reports, again, are due in December, covering July 1st to October 31st. And this is the first checkpoint. It's the first really solid check-in in the current fiscal year. And there you will see updated revenue and expenditure estimates and whether the district is maintaining a positive certification. Then next we slide into January. That's where the governor's budget is released for the following year. So in January, the governor releases the first proposed state budget for the coming year. This helps inform early revenue assumptions for next year's budget development and starts having those conversations as to where the district is heading, where the county office is heading, particularly in alignment with the LCAP for the future year, the following year. Trustees, I think, should ask themselves, what's in the proposal that could impact our funding or priorities? If priorities have been set, right, and if reductions need to be made, what does that look like? So having those conversations early is important to maintain the integrity of the programs that we serve. In March, so see how it's pivoting back and forth. In March, you're going to revisit second interim for the current fiscal year. So in March, you receive the second interim covering November through January. And this is your last formal update before the end of the fiscal year. It's so important to catch any mid-year shifts, such as declining enrollment, grant changes, and cost increases. And now we're going to pivot forward. In May, the May revise is when the governor releases a revised state budget proposal for the next fiscal year. This is based on updated tax revenues and drives the final version of your own county office budget. If there's any changes to the local control funding formula, the cost of living adjustment, the COLA, or one-time funds, this is where you would see those transactions, those shifts, right, in your budget. And then in June, again, we're circling right back. In June, the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability, and budget public hearings take place. Before the final budget adoption, boards hold public hearings on the Local Control Accountability Plan and the budget. This ensures, again, transparency and gives the community a chance to weigh in. This leads us back to the top of the cycle where the budget and local control accountability adoption process occurs in June. So I think for some key takeaways for you is that the budgeting is a continuous overlapping cycle. You see how it pivots from current year to the following fiscal year. It also, you're reviewing current year adjustments, closing the prior year books, and developing next year's plan all at once. And then understanding this cycle really ensures that you're asking the right questions at the right time. We have statutory deadlines that have to be met in terms of staffing reductions and program shifts. So knowing these timelines and the importance of what process of the cycle we're in is so essential to ensuring that we stay abreast of everything that's happening at the county office level. The business office is definitely juggling multiple hats during this time. So any questions? Okay. So local control funding formula, the funding categories, and then property taxes. We're going to dive into this section here. Under LCFF, under the local control funding formula, districts and county offices are funded in one of two ways. The LCFF, the local control funding formula, state aid funding portion, provides funding that brings county offices up to its LCFF entitlement. LCFF is the local control funding formula. This is in the majority of county offices. Then we have the community funded, community aid funded, also formerly known as basic aid. These districts generate enough property tax revenue on their own to exceed the LCFF entitlement, so they don't receive additional state aid. County offices of education can also fall into either category, although most are still in state aid funded categories. So really understanding your county office's funding type is crucial because it affects how sensitive you are to state level decisions. Community funded districts and county offices rely heavily on local property tax performance, while local control formula funded districts rely on the state's budget health. So those are the two variances in the funding determination. For property taxes, the mechanism is really assessed in 5 steps. The assessment is controlled at the county assessor's level. The county assessor determines the value of taxable property each year, which serves as the basis for local property tax revenue. We work closely in Tuolumne County. We work closely with our tax assessor and auditor to ensure that we're providing adequate and the best available information at the time to our CBOs, to our districts. We have 11 districts and 1 charter school in Tuolumne County, and we work very closely. We have 2 basic aid districts, 2 community funded districts in Tuolumne County, so it's important that I am able to relay appropriate assessed values for looking forward for multi-year projections for our districts. It's very critical that they have the best available information. Unlike COLA, they budget differently for those fluctuations in revenue. The tax rate application, a standard rate is usually 1% of the assessed value per Proposition 13 that was passed many years ago. It's applied along with any approved voter debt, bonds, etc. And then the collection of property taxes are collected in 2 installments in December and April by the county tax collector. And then it is apportioned through the county auditor. So the county auditor distributes the revenues to schools, cities, and special districts, and other on other bases of various formulas. Schools and COEs receive their portion depending on when they are LCFF funded or community funded. So really, even though schools don't set or control property tax rates, property tax performance directly impacts school funding, especially for community funded districts. Whether a district relies on state aid or local property taxes, understanding the flow of these dollars from assessment to apportionment is extremely important in interpreting budget reports and long-term financial planning. And I'm going to touch on that a little further along when we discuss ending fund balance and cash, because it's so important that the district and county office, that they maintain sufficient cash flow and able to make that payroll every month and ensure that they're able to keep the lights on every month. Let's see. Now I'm going to, before we dive deeper into the revenue sources, I'd like to share a short video that gives a clear overview of how LCFF, how the local control funding formula works. This will help connect the dots between state aid, property taxes, and how funding reaches our schools. It's a great visual refresher for both new and experienced board members alike. In this particular video, I love it because it's narrated by Julia Odom from Manteca Unified School District Board of Trustees Student Board Representative. I think it's so awesome that they have a student board representative on their board. And so she created this video a couple of years ago. So I hope you enjoy it. Now let me see, I'm gonna try to link this. Give me 1 second.
Got you covered. I dropped the link in the chat for you.
Oh, okay. Let me share.
If you're like most in California, you probably attended a K-12 public school system. Perhaps your brother or sister, your parents, and your grandparents did too. Over 90% of K-12 students in California attend public schools to receive an education. The value of a good education is priceless. Without one, it is difficult to go to college, get a job, support a family, or even make ends meet. Perhaps the most important aspect of providing a good education is to be sure that schools are receiving enough money to do their jobs. So, how are California schools funded, and who decides how much? The state spends about 40% of its annual budget on education. Based on student population, demographics, and economic need, the state of California's Local Control Funding Formula, or LCFF, decides how much money a school district receives to operate. Once the LCFF declares an allocated amount for a school district, that amount is funded first by local funds and then by state funds. On average, local funds only make up 22% of the LCFF amount. Very few school districts fulfill or exceed this amount with local funds alone. But no matter how much local funds a school district receives, the state will not provide funds to exceed the amount designated by LCFF. For example, let's say that the LCFF decides that North Pole School District will receive $1 million in funds. Whether North Pole School District receives $100,000 or $800,000, designated $1 million. Where do the dollars go? On average, school districts spend between 75 and 85% of their budget on people. The remaining is spent on services and operations, and calculations. Money that California school districts and multi-purpose rooms is in addition to our state-provided LCFF budget allocation, simply because there are not enough funds. The state determines how much a school district receives in funding, but they do not have the final say. Local developments, other local funds can all help the schools in your community become great. Remember that great schools create great communities, and great communities create great schools.
Okay, let me get back. Sorry about that. Oops. Sorry, technical difficulty here. I apologize. Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay, so now I hope that that was beneficial. I love that video. Again, it's great that they're able to incorporate their student board representative. So now let's discuss, now that you have a brief overview of the local control funding formula components, let's discuss its primary funding. As you know, this is the primary funding mechanism for schools in California. It also provides general funding based on average daily attendance, or you'll often hear student attendance days divided by the total school days. The local accountability plan helps define the goals of each local education agency, or LEA, by incorporating stakeholder input from teachers, students, parents, guardians, community members, bargaining units, and governing boards. The LCFF funding consists of two primary components: the property taxes that we discussed earlier, and that's determined at the local level, and the state aid. So the state provides additional funding to meet the local control funding formula target when local property taxes are insufficient. Other revenue sources include federal revenue. These revenues are typically restricted and may include carryover and are or could be grant-based. Those include forest reserves, Every Student Succeeds Act, title funding, special education funding, both state and federal. The federal component is the IDEA funds, or Individual Disability Education Act. It's also referred to as IDEA. Then our state funds include our AB 602 funding, our lottery funding, other child development grants, mandated cost reimbursements, and then our local revenue, of course, includes our interest earnings, donations, any property leases that we may generate funds through. Those are all included in our property tax, or I'm sorry, our local revenue earnings. Regarding our fund classification, you will frequently hear your CBO discuss two different types of fund classifications during budget presentations: restricted versus unrestricted. So your restricted funds, these are the funds that are earmarked for specific purposes, and they come with strings attached. So usually they're set by law or grants or external agencies. Some examples could include, again, special education funding, such as the AB 602 funding, or Title I federal funds, or our lottery, our restricted components, which are specifically for instructional materials. So those funds you cannot move or reassign. You have to use those for the specific purpose for which they were granted. You cannot move or reassign to general operations or other programs. So think of these restricted funds. A good way that I like to think about them is they're like tagged dollars, and they must be used exactly as intended. And we're accountable for tracking those. So tracking every penny of them. So those typically, those funds usually come with reporting requirements, right? So we have to ensure that they're spent as intended. For the unrestricted funds, these funds provide maximum flexibility, and they're used to support the general operation of the county office. Those include your local control funding formula base funding, local revenues without conditions. So think, for example, like lease income or interest earned income. And then you have your unassigned reserves. So I just want to be very clear that unassigned doesn't mean unaccounted for, right? It just means that the county superintendent has discretion to decide how to best use these dollars to meet student needs, local goals, and to achieve the vision and mission of the County Board of Education in educating the most vulnerable students, which are typically the programs that we serve at the county level. Other expenditures, so we have our key budget consideration for county offices of education, right? We have our personnel costs and labor agreements. As we heard a bit ago in the LCFF video, salaries and benefits typically account for 80 to 85% of the county office's budget, and not to mention school districts. Status of labor agreements with employees, employee groups, including classified and certificated unions, step and column adjustments impacting ongoing personnel costs, increasing STRS and PERS costs, increasing worker comp costs, and any other statutory related payroll costs. Attrition trends, including retirements and resignations, all of those components can impact your certificated and classified expenditures. Program-driven staffing needs, such as student-teacher ratios in alternative education and special education programs. For example, the preschool program, we offer a structured preschool program, and we have a 2-to-1 ratio in those programs. So all of those considerations impact the budget, right? All of those staffing decisions. Then we have our multi-year salary and benefit implications for financial stability that we have to keep an eye on. And then costs for substitutes and stipends, particularly in hard to fill positions. I think that's a statewide concern and issue right now, where it's very difficult to hire a speech language pathologist or a psychologist, special education specialists and teachers. So those one-time stipends or multi-year stipends to attract, recruit, and retain qualified staff, all of those expenditures have implications to our certificated and classified salary lines. Our statutory and health benefit considerations, I kind of touched on this. The rates for statutory benefits which are tied to salaries are difficult to control, right? We don't have any control over STRS rates, PERS rates. So the STRS is the teacher pension system. The PERS is the classified pension system, our Medicare, our unemployment insurance, workers' comp insurance, Social Security expenses. We can't control those, but we have to account for them and budget wisely. Health and welfare benefits, we can control what we agree on and ratify moving forward, but any health and welfare benefits that were grandfathered in from previous settlement negotiations, many county offices have to account for that. Many COEs cap employer contributions to benefits. Some COEs provide retiree health benefits, requiring long-term planning. Other post-employment benefits. Businesses offering retiree benefits must also account for future liabilities under GASB 75, ensuring sustainability. If we make a commitment and a promise to retirees, we have to ensure that we can fulfill that obligation. So GASB 75 ensures that it holds county offices and school districts accountable for that. Our supplies, operations, and other outside services can be one-time in nature or ongoing. So one-time expenditures or cyclical expenditures, including technology upgrades, instructional materials, and deferred maintenance, could be included in this category. Capital outlay needs, including facility upgrades, relocations, and lease agreements would be included as well. And then our major long-term obligations, such as lease purchase agreements, facilities, vehicles, or equipments, are included in the last three: keeping, consulting, and contracts. I really love this slide because it's it tends to be confusing And so I love this slide because it's so clear. One of the biggest misconceptions in school finance is assuming that the ending fund balance equals cash on hand, and it doesn't. And here's why. So what is fund balance? Your fund balance is essentially your financial net position at the end of the fiscal year. So it can include accumulated surpluses or deficits. It represents what's available after all the revenues and expenditures are accounted for. So it has multiple components such as unrestricted reserves, like your reserve for economic uncertainty. It includes restricted balances, so only usable for specific purposes. The committed or assigned funds set aside by the county superintendent or management for specific uses is included. Any revolving cash or petty cash would be included as well. And then again, any undesignated balances, if any, would be included in that component. So think of fund balance as a set of labeled buckets, each representing dollars spoken for in different ways. So that's what your ending fund balance is. What is cash? Cash is the actual money in the bank. So your liquid assets. It's what's immediately available for payroll, bills, and purchases. It does not include any receivables or funds that have not yet been deposited. So here's the tricky part. You may have a healthy fund balance, but still face cash flow issues. You may ask yourself why? How would that happen? So this would typically be a concern for if you have reimbursements that are delayed, or if the state is implementing deferrals. We faced that during the pandemic, and we're facing that this year. It's minimal, but there are deferrals this year. And particularly if you're a community funded county office of education and you solely rely on property taxes as your main source of revenue, cash flow, you have to monitor that monthly, right? And at the county office level in Tuolumne County, we monitor cash for our districts. I know not all counties do that because some are very large. They don't have the capacity to do that. But we monitor our district's cash flow sheets every month to ensure that they're in line and that they're going to have sufficient payroll or funds to run payroll, right? So fund balance reflects the organization's overall financial position, but it's not the checkbook. Cash is what you can use today, and the two numbers often differ significantly. So I think it's important to ask the question, how much cash does my organization have on hand? I would ask that every couple months and see what your CBO has today. Your CBO will know right off the bat. And then another good question is, how does it compare to the ending fund balance? So I think those are two great questions. If you take two things away with you today, how much cash does my organization have on hand, and how does it compare to the ending fund balance? Reserves for economic uncertainty. So I love this slide also. So reserves, I love reserves. This reserve is a fiscal safety net, and it's established by Education Code. It's a safety net for any unexpected changes, like delays in apportionment, emergencies, or sudden drops in enrollment. The state minimum mandated by statute for economic uncertainty is based either on the agency's average daily attendance or total expenditures. So here you can see the slide shows the difference between school districts and county offices of education. School districts, their reserve for economic uncertainty is based on size, on average daily attendance, and county offices of education is based on their total expenditures. So for school districts, the ranges vary between 5% and 1%, and for county offices, the ranges vary between 2% and 5%, depending on their overall expenditures. Again, these levels are required by law and monitored during budget reviews. Maintaining this reserve is critical. It helps ensure payroll and essential services continue, even when cash flow is tight. Falling below the required reserve can result in a qualified or negative certification, which may lead to increased oversight. Boards may also adopt a local reserve policy that exceeds the minimum, which is best practice for long-term stability. And I'm pleased to say that Tuolumne County Superintendent of Schools, we have a 25% reserve for economic uncertainty goal, and we are currently at 21%. And for the 25-26 fiscal year, we will be bumping that up 1%, so we'll be at 22%. It's important to remember that this is not surplus cash. It's a strategic buffer to safeguard education continuity. So each year, School Services of California professionals reaffirm the Government Finance Officer Association, also referred to as GFOA. They affirmed their recommendation that LEAs maintain reserves equivalent to approximately 17% of their operating expenditures, which really, it sounds like a lot, but it only represents about 2 months of operational costs. Some districts choose to set that aside in designated funds or in separate account known as Fund 17, the Reserve for Economic Uncertainty. The majority of our districts in Tuolumne County operate under the 4% reserve standard. However, as reflected in this data, the state minimum reserve is widely considered inadequate, and LEAs, county offices should strongly consider increasing their reserves. Now that we've covered the broader compliance responsibilities and financial structures, I'd like to shift our focus to a basic overview of a sample county Office of Education's first interim data. I feel it's a practical example of how these elements come together in a real world budget snapshot. But before I proceed, are there any questions I can answer?
Lisa, I have a question.
Sure.
First of all, thank you very much for taking the time to present this information. Federal grants. Some federal grants are being eliminated. How does that, are you planning for that, or is that an issue for you? Kind of what percent of your budget is federal grants?
That's a great question. In Tuolumne County, it's a small percent, but it's about, I want to say it's less than 10% of our budget, but it's also it serves the most critical needs, right? It serves those most vulnerable population of students, our special ed students, our special education students with the ADs or the IDEA funds. And then our title fund serves our homeless foster youth and economically disadvantaged students. So it is a concern, and we are monitoring that. And at the end of my presentation, I have a looking ahead slide where I'm going to kind of touch on that and what I recommend we do moving forward, keeping that in mind.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So here we're going to, I'm going to refer to this county office as sample COE. And I know that it will look a little different depending on the local environment and how each LEA operates, but I'm going to just do a broad overview of what the budget would look like. So understanding the various funds managed at sample COE, I'm going to refer to it as SCOE or SCO. While county offices of education may manage multiple funds based on their unique needs and goals, tonight we're going to focus on general fund, which is the primary account that supports the day-to-day operations of SCO's budget. However, it's important to acknowledge that other funds at that SCO's operates. So it includes adult education, which is Fund 11, child development is Fund 12, deferred maintenance is Fund 14, a special reserve for economic uncertainty is Fund 17, and then they have Fund 20, which is the special reserve for post-employment benefits, which ensures that they can fund retiree commitments that they have made. And then Fund 40 is our capital outlay fund and for any facility related items. So these are just a few examples. Additional funds may be included in other COEs depending on the dynamics and the structure. This is what is included in the example for tonight. So now I want to dive into Fund 1, which is the general fund. And again, it's the day-to-day operations budget. And I just want to to hopefully do a sneak peek into how it's sustained to ensure that essential programs and services are able to continue. So here's a snapshot of Sample COE's 24-25 first interim report, Form 1, the general fund. It reflects actuals through October 31st with updated projections for the remainder of the year. You'll notice several columns. The original budget is column A. The board approved budget is column B. And then you have actuals to date, which is column C. And then the projected year totals, column D, and it has the blue arrow directly above it. The purpose of updating this budget document known as Form 1 is to monitor financial health and ensure that the county office maintains, on track to meet its obligations throughout the fiscal year. So Section A, you'll see all your revenues. Total revenues are projected at 26.3 million, which in comparison to the original or the board approved budget, it's up $885,000 from original budget. The key reasons for that, there was an increase in federal revenue. It grew about $210,000 for updated grant allocations. Other state revenue rose by about $312,000 due to adjusted apportionments from the state. So the overall revenue trends are positive with the 3.5 total increase. Section B, right below that, reflects all of the expenditures. So the expenditures are projected at 25.1 million, nearly unchanged from original budget. This budget was pretty solid in its budgeting. Certificated salaries and employee benefits show modest increases. Books and supplies are under budget by 73,000 due to timing or savings in the purchasing outline for the remainder of the fiscal year. Services and operating expenses are $452,000 lower, and that is because of unnecessary contracts that they thought they were going to need. So really, in the overall picture, no major red flags are jumping out at me, but it's good to continue to keep monitoring. Section C, the net operating results. So the net result is a $1.4 million surplus projected. That means the revenues are exceeding expenditures. And this is a healthy signal, and it shows good budget control so far this year. Section D and E, the fund balance, no interfund transfers are projected, and sample COE is reflecting an operating surplus again of 1.4 million. The blue arrow is reflected there in the bottom half of the page. And the ending fund balance on June 30th is projected at 20.3 million, up from 19.8 million, and only $2,000 is currently shown as reserved received in cash. Before I go into the key takeaways for the board, I just wanted to touch on the projected fund balance again is at $20 million, and I know that sample COE at the last time I checked, they had $18 million in cash. So you see that's the difference in fund balance versus cash in hand. There's a $2 balance. So quickly, some key takeaways for the board. This Office of Education is in solid position as of the year. The structural deficit is reinvestment and reserve planning to address future needs.
I have a question.
I think I would like to share that game ask. So if you were in the scenario, you could ask the new revenue. Oh, yes, sorry.
I'm sorry, you keep cutting out, so I'm not sure if are you frozen right now, or do you hear me?
Oh no,
There's
I'm
just a
sorry. I
slight
can't hear you. I
delay.
was waiting for your question. I apologize.
No, that's right. I'm just trying to understand why you have column A and B. What's the necessity, if they're the same, to have them both there?
That is a great question. Thank you for asking that. So column A is your original budget, And then column B is your board approved budget. Those match at first interim. But come second interim, your projected totals that you see, your first interim data will be your board approved data, and your second interim data will be where that arrow is, the projected year column. So it seems redundant at first interim because those first two columns will always match. They will always match at first interim. Once you get to second interim, the numbers move to the left. So you'll have your original budget that will always stay the same. Whatever you approved in June for the following year, that will always remain the same. What will change is your board approved operating budget, column B, and then column D, which is your projected totals. Because that will turn into your second interim data. Does that make sense?
I'll just have to play it out. I'm not sure I understand that part of it. But I'm new, so I'll figure it out.
It's okay. And I'm happy to have a conversation with you after after the presentation or this coming week, and we can go into it in detail if you'd like. So I just wanted to touch on a couple questions that you may want to ask if you were faced with this budget. Is the LCAP aligned with the updated revenue trends, and maybe do expenditure savings suggest an underserved areas or delayed needs? Those are just questions that come to mind when you see shifts like this between original budget and first interim. So again, as mentioned before, the LCFF is the main funding source. Total LCFF revenue is projected at 1.8 million. The state aid is projected at 6 million. Education protection account is 312,000, and then local property taxes is projected at 1.8 million dollars. It's important to note that exact allocation percentages can vary annually on assessed property values when we're talking about local property taxes. So just remember that number can fluctuate. And when that fluctuates, your state will backfill that. So there might be minor shifts throughout the year when you're looking at first interim and second interim. Other funding revenue sources, federal revenue, 1.9 million. Other state revenue is projected at 6.4 million, and then local revenue is 9.9 million. So the local revenue includes SELPA transfers. The sample COE offers, is the only regionalized provider in the county. So all of the county operated district funded programs for special education are operated at the county office. That's why there's a significant influx in local revenue. It's a fee-for-service model, so the county office charges the districts for serving their students, and we receive that as tuition. And then interest earned income and contracts are included in the local revenue. The total expenditures, as we saw on Form 1, total 25,113,552. Of that, certificated salaries was just under 5 million, classified salaries 6.5 million, and employee benefits was just over 4.7 million. Books and supplies, minimal 780,000. Services and other operating expenditures is just over $6.6 million. Capital outlay, $1.4 million. They had a major HVAC renovation project at that county office, so that's why you see that capital outlay at such a high number. Then we have our components of ending fund balance. For this county office, you can see the total ending fund balance is $20.2 million, and all of the designations referenced on this slide are, again, the Reserve for Economic Uncertainty at the very bottom. That's designated by the County Board of Education. They have designated a 21% reserve for this given year. And all of the other items here referenced are at the discretion of the county superintendent to align with the vision and mission of the County Office of Education.
So
And
Lisa,
this is just, yes.
are we going to have access to all your slides, especially the ones like this where you highlight certain things?
Absolutely,
These will be
absolutely.
distributed after the call.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And this form here is just an excerpt of the actual budget document, what it will look like in your SACS form, in your the SACS document that you are presented with annually or 4 times a year. You'll see the designations referenced as such, and they may have different titles, obviously, based on local needs. So we're almost done. Thank you so much for hanging in there with me this evening. I just wanted to touch on a couple of items looking ahead, and I know we're almost out of time, so I'll be quick here. Looking ahead, navigating the uncertainties in education, the California outlook, we're looking at a 2.3 cost of living adjustment for 25-26. It was projected at 2.46, and that came down slightly. This is the best available information based on the School Services of California resource. State revenues remain volatile. However, the legislative office continues to project an upside in Prop 98 guarantee, which is our main funding source for schools and county offices, due to economic softening and capital gains variability. So the budget, so here's the budget caution ahead. The governor's budget proposes delaying 1.6 million settle up payments and deferring new program expansion to preserve stability. So the governor will release his May revise this week on Friday at 10 a.m. And you can view that on the YouTube channel. It's the governor's YouTube channel. He usually comes on around 15 after 10. So that will be a great insight in to see what is happening for next year. So while the COLA is positive, it's modest and not likely to keep pace with the cost and increases in staffing, insurance, and operations. So just we'll keep that in mind. In terms of the federal landscape, the proposed budget cuts for 2025 federal budget proposes reductions to key education programs, including Title I and educator development grants. There's an impact on restricted programs serving adult education, title programs, migrant education, etc. Those are all facing cuts potentially. It's really volatile at this moment. Federal support is especially critical for rural and high poverty and special education populations. So we always keep that in mind, and that's what gives us panic when we see so much volatility coming from the federal level. And changes here could shift significant burdens to the state and local level. So we're just continuing to monitor that. In the president's budget, there seems to be an exclusion. So no reductions to special education at this time is what we're seeing. But again, we will continue to monitor that. So some key takeaways for board members: monitor the May revise and federal policy updates. The federal information is coming out regularly and volatile for sure. Advocate for stable funding, especially for vulnerable populations, and then plan conservatively moving forward. So I know this was a long presentation, but I'll entertain any questions that you may have. And I thank you so much for your attention.
Well, let me start the conversation then. Lisa, could you talk a little bit about why we should be worried about, we should make sure our reserves are high as we're going into the future, especially for those who lived through the last recession?
Sure. Personally, I think that having a higher reserve allows for time to make the necessary reductions in staffing. Having a strong reserve for economic uncertainty really allows for allows for easing into those reductions, right? Because we know we have to reduce class sizes if enrollment drops. So having the reserves just prolongs that somewhat and just eases into making those tough decisions to follow through with layoffs. Because cutting supplies and cutting operating expenditures won't make a dent in the budget, right? When you're facing cuts, it's really the people, unfortunately. It's those tough decisions of reducing staff that makes the biggest impact in a budget.
Lisa, this is Yvonne Chan from LACO. Following up on the question about reserve, okay? So LACO, though, is very big, but yet meaning, however, is quite, volatile because we only directly serve about 1,300 kids, and yet we have so many grants, federal, state, etc., and as well as Head Start. So the board required 10%. LACO has always required 10%, which is huge. So
Yeah.
here comes a question. Of course, every year when we start looking at salary increase, and other, needs that the labor union wants, the consistently having question is, well, you have all of this reserve. Why couldn't you release this for salary raise? How would the board answer things like that?
So I think that a good response to that could be that your reserve is one-time money, right? One time in nature. Salary is ongoing. It is not financially prudent. It is not wise to spend one-time money on ongoing expenditures that cost that, living and breathing expenditures. So that's one way of saying that, reflecting that message that utilizing one-time funds is not going to solve the problem. You want to avoid financial hardship down the road. And by maintaining at least a 10% reserve allows for that, allows for the rainy day, the potential economic downturn that we can potentially face in the future. I think LACO's reserve requirement is 1%, if I'm not mistaken, because of the size of your budget.
Correct.
So if the GFOA and the School Services of California and all of the entities are recommending a 17% reserve, a 10% reserve is really modest and really good to have.
Yeah, it was just a board policy that
Right.
every year we've been kind of pushed back and forth, and for us not to do that, but I think so far so good. Thank you. Your answer is a good answer, though.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, I know because Lisa and I worked a lot on the reserves together, and the board actually, our board in Tuolumne County passed a resolution that our goal was to get to 25% for economic uncertainty, so that we didn't have to scramble or make some really tough decisions on the fly, so that we gave ourselves some breathing room. And I'm happy, even though I'm not on the board, I'm happy still to see that the board and Lisa are still continuing to try and get us to that 25%, so that we have that. We just have that available to us if we need it, because who knows what is really going to happen at any given time with the state or the federal government.
Right, absolutely.
And Lisa, this is Yvonne. I have one more question, if you don't mind, because I thank you so much for your expertise. Is that, okay, the board, okay, let's say the superintendent and the cabinet, etc., they develop the budget. The board approves the budget. And as Beth said, not by line item. How much, to what extent the board can say, wait, I would like to see how you allocate, maybe by department, how you allocate to the court schools. Can we ask those, not only can we ask those questions, but really require or request or want that kind of information so that we can kind of see if there's any equity or distribution among different departments.
Right. That's a really good question. I think that it depends on your local culture. I think you have every right to ask for more detail and to ask for specific, backup documentation on allocation. I think that it's prudent to ask those questions. I don't know that, I love those kind of questions, and I know our board has always been very good about that, but also keep maintaining that fine line between the budget development and then the oversight and approval of the budget, ensuring that that line is not crossed. Does anyone want to add to that?
I would, because in Placer County, we worked hard at the issue. One of the reasons why throughout the year we have conversations and updates about the programs that the county runs that we don't directly control. So it's not Court Community School or our charter that we've authorized, but we need to know all these other programs of what they do so that we can in fact understand when it comes to budget time, why we're making those investments and why those dollars are important. So we can actually feel the same sense of ownership into that budget, which is, as you say, it's a programmatic piece. So we participate in that sense. We also have two budget liaisons on our board that have a responsibility to work alongside in terms of the budget development process. So that those are our we rely upon staff, but two of our board members are responsible for, tracking it a little better and helping that process along. So that has helped us when it comes to questions. There's always details that we don't know. And that's okay because it's a lot of detail. But the hope is that we are actually able to say, oh, so this is our investment in early childhood development. This is our investment in our staff development work and our CNI division or something like that. Yep. So I do recommend for new board members that you think about how you will in fact become better informed on the full content of the budget through whatever process your local board and superintendent are using.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing your insight from the board level perspective, for sure. I know I love when board members read my budget. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, more questions. Yeah. So I love that. I think it's important and it's transparent, and I try to provide as much information, but when there's that engagement and Q&A, I think it's really helpful for everyone.
Well, I just want to go ahead and give another thank you to Lisa. We really appreciate you coming and speaking to us and giving us this wealth of information. I think this was an incredible presentation, and it was actually very information dense. So I hope our members will remember to record it, or not record it, but remember to watch the recording because we've already recorded it. But we'll make sure to promote it and send it out more broadly so that folks can have this information because it's very useful. I've already dropped the link to this survey in the chat. In the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and advance this forward to just briefly cover off on some next steps. We hope that you all will join us at our legislative forum on May 19th. The image and the link here are both going to take you to our registration form where you can go ahead and make sure you save that to your calendar. It's a free event to attend. We'll be speaking with Congressman Al Muratsuchi from District 66. He's going to just talk about the budget and some of the priorities he has this year while also taking questions from our audience and from our members. We also have our next advocacy committee meeting planned for June 11th. God, that is a mouthful. I'm going to get that down one day. Our next advocacy committee meeting is planned for June 11th. Also, sign up to receive one-on-one coaching or mentoring from members of our community. In the survey for today's workshop, there's actually a question about mentoring and whether you'd like to sign up for one. So please respond to that survey, get a mentor, find someone who you want to help develop your experience and your skills as a board trustee. And with that, I'll go ahead and stop talking and end the recording. In case we have any final comments